Greetings everyone, Jeremy Sutton from PrecisionPrinciple.com on day 26 of the Intensive Ashtanga Yoga Training. Now, recently we finished the portion of our anatomy class. Through this class we covered bones, digestion, the digestive system, the muscular systems, the joints, all the possible movements of the joints, and in particular how all of the muscles engage to help each joint move in a particular way during each asana. That is, during every pose, we combed through the whole body and figured out exactly what muscles are engaged, what muscles are relaxed, and this like. To conclude the class, we talked about the Ayurvedic tradition, the Ayurvedic medicine in general, and the Dr. Amrita, the person who conducted the class, is a doctor in Ayurveda medicine, and so we were given a very brief, huge overview of the topic of Ayurveda. And so today I would like to consider some of the major ideas of the Ayurvedic tradition, how they can be used positively, and maybe some things that I don't necessarily find it difficult to agree with. So let's just start with the basics. This Ayurvedic tradition is one that comes from, originally from the Vedas, and Ayur means something along the lines of knowledge or science, it was told to us. The essence is that this is the science or knowledge of life, of the biological processes of health. The point is to for two points. One, for healthy people, how can we make healthy people healthier? How can we maintain our health if we happen to be healthy? And also, if we are sick, how can we get better? And the perspective of Ayurveda is going to have very direct ways pertaining to each person's constitution. Everyone's a little bit unique, and so there's going to be unique ways for each of us to reach those goals based on how we are. So in particular, it's important to note that this Ayurvedic tradition is following the pretense that there are 5 basic elements that make up everything. You will have definitely heard of these. In general, it goes from the most ethereal, we'll say the lightest, the least physical, to the most physical. And the order in particular is ether, air, fire, water, earth. Right? So ether, air, fire, water, earth. Ether is space. It's the vacuum we could think about. You look at the space throughout the cosmos. It is if there was nothing there, ether would be that nothingness, just the space, the nothingness that into which everything else sort of comes into being. For example, a primary example that she was given was that, for example, in an atom, we have the nucleus of the atom, and way on the outside we have a very, very tiny electron just cruising around in a cloud of probability around it. Well, the space between the nucleus and the electron, that is what they're talking about with this idea of ether. All right. So space. We'll go with space at first. Next we have air. Air is movement in the sense that when you look to your curtain that's kind of flowing on the edge, that's the air that's moving it. All right. So this is the lightest. This has to do with in the body. This has to do with all the movements that we make. Basically, the idea of movements. In the mind, we're talking about things like knowledge, ideas. This could be quickness, talkativeness. People who move quickly are considered to have a lot of air element. All right, this is, again, following the tradition of Ayurveda. Stick with me for a minute. Next, we have fire. Fire has things like the passions. But in particular, the primary element, the primary quality of fire is that it transforms things. In the sense that if you burn something, it's never going to be the same thing as it was before you burned it, right? If you bake a cookie, right, you put all the dough together, all that there, and then as soon as you bake it into the cookie, there's no unbaking it. That baking process literally transforms the dough into a cookie. Same thing with rubbers in a tire. You can never undo a tire because the tires are made of a whole mix of different chemicals that make it. So there's no undoing transformations from fire. Next we got the water element. Water is fluid, it's cool, it is about, it's flexible, right? If you throw anything into a pond and it responds perfectly no matter what. So that is the water element. Then we come to earth element, which is the most physical. This is our physical body, everything that's hard, teeth, nails, and these are the 5 constituents of reality. In a modern scientific tradition, people are going to argue with the idea of element, this essence of element. And you won't get any argument from me. That is, in some ways, a mistranslation of what those are. Because though those 5 things are not elements, what we might consider them in a more helpful way is that those are basically the five stages of matter, right? If you're taking a science class, you take water, we have gas, liquid, solid, depending on the temperature. That's gas, that's air. Liquid, that's water. Solid, that's earth, in this sense, right? So they are pointing to things that are part of our reality. And what about fire? Well, plasma. A fire is not. It's not the same thing as just air or gas. It's actually plasma, right? It's a different state of matter that things can get into. And then ether is the space in which everything kind of comes together. So remember, this is an old tradition, so just stick with me while we go through these ideas. Our constitution is going to be based on these things, right? So if someone has a lot of air element as part of their personality, we might think of these as an ancient personality. It's a holistic healthcare system. I mean, this is going to consider what kind of food we should eat based on who we are, type of places we should live, how we should sort of conduct ourselves for thriving, considering the specific constitution of our own mind and our own body. Because the way I'm built is different than the way you're built, and I would say this is probably the most helpful single quality from this Ayurvedic tradition is this basic idea that we're all different, right? What's a perfect diet for me is not going to be a perfect diet for you, or a perfect diet for my mom or my friends. We're all going to be a little bit different, right? But we all have similarities. We should probably all eat a lot of vegetables. But some people have adverse effects to the capsicum, vegetables, like bell peppers. Some people react with high acidity. Some people, dairy is good for a lot of people. Some people are lactose intolerant. A glass of milk will kill them if they're not careful. Same thing. We should mostly all eat a lot of fruit, but some people are fructose intolerant, so they're going to have quite adverse reactions to that apple that most of us is going to help keep the doctor away, so to speak. So if there's one good key takeaway from this, it's that you have to be aware that what's good for you is not going to be good for me necessarily, but it might be worth taking a look at it. We can learn from each other's experience. So we got to test it out for ourselves. We got to see what's going to work and go from there. Next, a very positive quality of this is that we're looking. It's a lens for not only our personality types, because for example, people with fire traits are going to be aggressive and fiery and passionate, so to speak, but they also might have big egos. But since fire is the essence of transformation, coming through a big ego, you might kind of reach the end of your limits, and then you might have a transformation into the more spiritual nature, so to speak. These are all ideas that came from the class. The people who are airy, for example, although airhead in the Western tradition will make you sound like you don't have much going on up here, people who are high in the air element are knowledgeable. They're fast talkers. They're fast walkers. They're people who are thinking all the time. But with this might come things like indecision and other traits. Water, of course, has its own flexibility, a number of things. I don't want to get too far into each of the elements because I'm not an expert in this, and I might very well misrepresent the specific claims given by these things. There are some things that I think really beg some skepticism, and we should really kind of skeptically interrogate and critically analyze anything that comes our way. When someone tries to tell us a way that health should be, or that this is the way that things are, because that's essentially what this theory is arguing, that these are the fundamentals of reality, and based on these fundamentals you can have these mental and physical traits built upon you, and based upon these physical and mental traits, these are the recommendations that are specific to your situation, right? So that right there is a great idea. That's a holistic healthcare system. If I take the fundamentals of reality, fundamentals of who I am, how does my body work, what is the situation that I'm in. This is basically integral health. This is mind-body health. In the Great Courses has a brand new course on the mind-body health, and they very much emphasize the biopsychosocial model, which basically bio is biology, psycho is psychology, social is my friends and community, but also my environment, right? And these are the essence of everything that can affect me are in this in that system. So that is a good lens, but I must raise some questions. All right, these are things that I have to ask if I'm to really legitimately consider this lens as a way towards health, because the argument would be that these basic 5 elements are what make us up. All right, that's okay. Even though I think using chemistry and biology is a more accurate depiction of what actually makes us up. I don't know. You will find water in me, but I'm not sure if the water element in me is going to affect my personality. And the fire element in me, the acids in my stomach. If I have a lot of acid, am I also more likely to be aggressive, for example? Since the fire element is supposed to be responsible for not only kind of aggression and kind of determinism and being determined and being pointed and diligent and have a lot of willpower, have a lot of creative energy, and so these are fire affects these things, but fire is also supposed to affect my metabolism. If I have a lot of fire element, then I should digest food really easily. And there's even claims that, for example, people who have high fire element are likely to have maybe boils in their skin, boils or pimples or skin problems in general, because they're going to be dry, because they're going to be hot. So these are empirical questions that can be tested with validity, right? If I can go out and do a test, and I can find people who rate highly on scales of aggression, and then I can ask them if they burn easily, right? And we can find out how susceptible their skin is to burning. But to me, the obvious problem is that people with white skin burn easily. People with dark skin don't burn easily. So following this logic of the Ayurvedic system, we should come to say that, okay, so does that mean everybody who has darker skin is going to be not aggressive, not creative, is going to not have boils or pimples? Well, this is not really a logical conclusion, because we know that aggression, creativity, and pimples do not correlate strongly with skin burning. That is, people of all different races from around the world some have creativity, some don't have creativity. Some have boils and pimples, some don't have boils and pimples. Some have aggression, and some don't have aggression. Right? This is a fact. Goes throughout the world. So the point is this: we need to be critical of information that comes at us. If people can speak very cogently. For example, in this system, every single one of the elements has so many qualities that you're guaranteed to identify with some of those qualities and guaranteed to not identify with some of those qualities. The problem for me with the system is that it's always moves the goalposts back. I would highly recommend anybody watching this check out the Great Courses series called Your Deceptive Mind, and there it goes really in depth into how we can be critical thinkers about information that may or may not be legitimate. And one of the ways that things can seem very legitimate, even though they may not be 100%, is this: they always bend the criteria so it fits the situation, and it turns out that there's no way you can possibly disprove it. So, for example, this system is so flexible that there's no way that you could ever really say, "Oh no, this proves us wrong." There's no way to ask a question that could possibly go against the theory. Here's an example: if I say, oh, wait a minute, I have a lot of the air element because I think so much, but I don't have a lot of the negative air elements because I don't have problems with indecision, right? So these are both qualities of the air element, someone who has a lot of the air. Okay, well, I have some of these, but I don't have some of these. But I do have some of the negative qualities over here, like, let's say, for fire, it's aggression. Oh, I do have aggression, but I do have this thinking, this kind of critical thinking. I think a lot also. How can I possibly explain that? Oh, that's easy. Because all of us are made up of a combination of these things. So of course you don't have all of the elements, all of the qualities associated with air, and you don't have all of the qualities associated with fire. You only have some of those. But the point is, Of course, we all have some of the qualities associated with all of those things. It would be crazy for someone, it would be impossible for someone to not be not thinking sometimes, and not be lazy sometimes, and not want to snack sometimes, and not have a bunch of these different diseases that tend to fall into the different categories of the different people. There's no way that there's no way that anyone's personality could ever disprove this, and that, so then someone might say, oh, so that must mean the theory is correct. But for example, anytime if I say, wait a minute, how come aggressiveness is not correlated very much at all with the likelihood of someone's skin burning, even though in this theory both of these are caused by fire element. So in this theory, it says that fire causes causes aggression, and it causes skin irritability. So the point is, I can test that fact, and we know that there is not a correlation between those two traits, because people of all races, of all different skin colors, all experience sunburn at their relative rates, and equally distributed. Basically, aggression is a common quality throughout humanity, and sure, some cultures might encourage more or less aggression, but as just a blanket, I think aggression is basically, as a character trait, more or less evenly distributed among people from all over the world. I mean, I think we might have to do a fact check on that, but I would encourage fact checks. Please double check. If I say something that you think is incorrect, please check it out for me. Send me a message and say, hey, Jeremy, you made a mistake. This is incorrect. This is, because if you don't take what I'm saying for granted as truth, skeptically interrogate what I'm saying. I would highly encourage skeptical interrogation. In fact, that's exactly the point of this whole conversation, is that if people tell you stuff that may or may not be true, or that sounds too good to be true, you got to look into it, look deeper into it. And that's why basically I have a big problem with the idea that this Ayurveda, I mean, maybe it's different in the modern era, but it comes from a thousands of year old tradition. So we're talking about thousands of year old. So how, in what sense people are saying, oh, it's the knowledge or the science of like life health? Well, my first question that I want to ask is, excuse me, what do you mean by science? Like, do you mean by science that the claims made by this tradition are tested empirically, or those that can be tested empirically are tested empirically, those that can only be tested qualitatively are tested qualitatively, and then based on those tests, where we look for examples that disprove the theory, do we then conclude whether or not this original statement is false or has been supported in the original sense? If that is not what you mean by science, then science is not the correct term, and that's a misstatement of what this tradition is. I think, I'm positive now in the modern era that much of the Ayurvedic claims must certainly have been tested. I mean, I can't imagine that doctors from around the world haven't heard the claims made by the Ayurvedic tradition and thought, oh, wait a minute, but why don't we test some of these? You know, here's a whole book of claims. I bet I got endless research that I could, facilitate a whole career investigating the type of claims that are made in these texts. And of course, there must be people who are looking to, who are very excited to either confirm or deny that these are real things. So I'm sure that these are being tested, but the problem I have basically is, in this tradition was even gone so far as to say that people of the different elements may even show different physical qualities. For example, people who have the Pitta dosha, this is the people who are dominated primarily by fire, are probably going to have sharper features. Well, one thing, it's like males are usually going to have sharper features. That's just a quality of the male sex compared. I mean, if you look at a drawing book, go learn how to draw the difference between male faces and female faces. What you're going to find is this: males on the cheekbones tend to have straighter lines and then straight down to the jaw, right? When you're drawing a female face, you need to be a little bit more curved on the face. Men's noses tend to be a little bit more rigid and jagged. Not always, of course, this is just generally speaking. And women's noses tend to be a little bit more rounded. Okay, so does that mean men as a sex have more of the fire quality? And then since men as a sex have more of the fire quality, they're going to have more of the psychological qualities associated with the fire quality. And the people who have the psychological qualities of the fire quality are also going to be more likely to get the diseases associated with the fire quality. This is a huge claim to be made by one underlying quality, that this idea of fire inside of me, that this fire is going. I can come up to somebody who has sharp facial features and say, oh, because you have sharp facial features, it's very likely that you are also creative, aggressive, have a big ego, and and burn easily in the sun, and might be less susceptible to pox and boils. Just because you have sharp features? No way. That's an audacious claim to make. It's overstretching the bounds of what one single element could possibly be responsible for, especially when considering that yes, we have stomach acid, that yes, there's chemical changes that happen during metabolism, but fire is not actually an element. It's a state of matter. Fire is plasma. It's not an element that I can actually be made of, and we know this because, for example, the periodic table of elements actually has the elements of what we are made of, the actual constituent parts, that make up a whole body, such as one like this, or the computer screen, or the air in between the computer screen. This is what everything really is made of, and even air can be transformed into solids if it gets cold enough. This is a scientific fact. Almost every item has a freezing point, including hydrogen and oxygen and all that jazz. It just tends to be much, much colder than what we tend to find here on Earth. So, point is that you got to look into whatever there are probably great claims made by Ayurveda that are true. I'm not at all discounting the science of Ayurveda, that which actually is science. I'm not discounting the claims of Ayurveda. I'm saying that there are got to be some good things that come out of this lens. Looking at health holistically, looking at like my mental constitution, my physical constitution, my social context, the food, the physical context around me, the food that I put into myself, the way that I conduct myself on a day-to-day basis. These are all extremely important aspects of health. What I am raising questions to is that if my facial features, my mental constitution, my physical constitution, and my diet should all be dictated based on this idea that we can identify something like a single element that is responsible for multiple aspects of my health and well-being. If empirical research bears out that these claims can be true, that they are true, then by all means, go for it. If there are Ayurvedic herbs, for example, herbs and foods that help us feel energized, by all means, go for it. But honestly, there's probably additional explanations for what's going on. I mean, for example, genetics and bacteria as underlying theories probably will bear a lot more fruit in actually identifying what is or is not wrong with us in a health situation compared to panning out how much air I have in me, or how much air element I have. The claim was even made that people who have a high air element can lead to Parkinson's. That Parkinson's is a disease that is caused by a very high amount of air element. And so Muhammad Ali must clearly have a lot of air element in him. Is that the case? I don't know. It's just not testable. Such a claim isn't testable because we haven't isolated what it means to have an air element in you. We can only extrapolate air element and say, oh, he thinks a lot, so he has air element. He has a lot of aggression, so he has air element. He or she is very flexible, so she has a lot of the water element. See, this is not. This is assuming that those elements exist beyond the qualities before we can identify those qualities ever. I mean, if my question is this: am I ever going to come to a point in my life where someone can be like, oh yeah, I can somehow test you empirically and say, yeah, you have a lot of water element in you. And I don't just mean that I'm carrying a lot of water, like I'm bloated, or you have a lot of air element in you. That shouldn't not just mean that I'm well oxidized because I've been breathing a lot lately. I've been doing my pranayama excellently, so now I have a lot of air element, because this claim would say, now that you have a lot of air element, as in, the only way we can test this is, oh, you have a lot of air in you, and so then it's like, okay, I have a lot of air in me. So do I demonstrate the qualities associated with the air element? That is, am I thinking a lot? Am I talking fast? Am I speaking fast? Am I walking fast? Am I having issues with indecision? In fact, another aspect associated with the air element was the ability to will spend a lot more. So the point is that these are huge claims made by huge claims based on very subtle elements. And at any time, there's no way to disprove it, because as soon as you say, oh well, I think a lot, but I also don't overspend. Planning is associated with the fire, so I think a lot, but I also plan a lot. So someone will, and immediately as soon as you say that, it's like, oh, well, of course, that's because you have a mix of both of them. Or maybe I just have these qualities, but these qualities don't have anything to do with the deeper elements that you're claiming they are of fire and air. That is a legitimate possibility, especially since we can't pin down these elements in the sense of our physical being. We can find these aspects of nature around us, and we are made, of course, of air, liquid, gas, liquid, and solid material. I mean, that's and we have digestive, transformative, metabolic processes that happen. But there are other theories that are more to me, it seems like there are other theories that are more comprehensive in actually diagnosing the causes of things like cancer, of pox and boils, of of pimples and the sort. So on the positive side, this tradition is encouraging a holistic look at medicine, and I would definitely recommend that. That is a great way, a great takeaway from life. This lens is encouraging self-awareness and self-reflection about basically being aware of what's going on in your own mind. What are the basic constitution of your own mental processes? What's the basic constitution of your own digestion, and what foods are good for you and what foods are not good for you? This type of awareness, totally excellent. Definitely you should know these things. Self-reflection, self-awareness, go for it. But some of the more extreme claims that somehow, like my physical features have implications for my mental processes and my digestive processes, that's a tough pill to swallow. Some things, yeah, oh sure. She said, for example, that the water element people are more likely to be plump. That's because they're full of water, right? They're full of the water element. So people who have the water element are more likely to snack often and to be generally plumpy, and they hold on to weight more often. Well, yeah, okay, so the point is that, sure, if you're plumpy and are overweight, then is it at least plausible that you're more likely to snack often? Sure, these two things might be together. But my question is, do they require a third element that is the water behind it to connect these two? Or is it possible that these two things are simply connected without the necessity of another third item? I mean, maybe there's a third item, maybe there's not. The point is, look more deeply into this. If Ayurveda is something that's worked for you and you found health benefits from that, by all means, excellent. Keep it up. I'm all for positive health, for positive awareness. Do whatever's working for you. But if you're not into Ayurveda and you haven't looked into it before and you don't feel a need, that's up to you to decide how much more deeply you'd like to look into it. I am skeptical of a lot of the claims, a lot of the specific claims made by this lens. I have a positive regard for all those bits of awareness, looking at health holistically, looking at my mind, reflecting, being aware of what's going on inside me, creating a specific life plan that's nice and tailored to my own constitution, both mental and physical. This is all excellent. So take the gems out of whatever you find and have a high filter of skepticism and critical thinking for whatever may or may not jive with your specific outlook on life. Take what works. Don't throw out everything. Look for the good stuff in what you can, and just go from there. So that's my take on that. Sorry, I got a little bit long today, but it's a deep topic. We talked for a long time about this, and we only have one day. So here is the synopsis of the major ideas. Thank you for joining me. Go ahead and click subscribe down below so you don't miss the updates as we keep going from here. And go check out precisionprinciple.com, where you find other tools to up your awareness, up your game, up your productivity, your creativity. And if you don't know where to start on the self-development path, we got 7 habits that you can get into right away that you can just put to use as soon as possible. So thank you for joining me. In the meantime, keep learning, keep growing, and have a great day.